What's up, you guys? Teller checking in for week 3 of this season's Dana White's Contender Series. I'll let you guys know right off the rip, it's looking like we are all go as far as the fight companion goes for this episode. So if you guys want to watch these fights live with me, it would be my pleasure to have you join me there on the live stream. Fights should be kicking off at 7 p.m. Eastern time zone, all right? Just if you guys are wondering if I don't look as clear as normal as far as my video goes here on my face, it's because I'm not using this more high-tech 4K thing that I usually use. I'm working on some things here. I'm getting a whole new computer system. This will allow me to play the videos of the fighters in the background more smoothly, because I've noticed it's been a little choppy when I'm on the 4K feed for myself. So I'm figuring all that out, guys. I'm getting a whole new computer system. So for those of you guys that like to look at all the crevices and pimples on the teller's face a little bit more in depth, I'm sorry about that. And maybe it's better I'm a little blurry for you guys there. So, but this is a solid episode. I'm telling you guys right now, there's a couple fighters that I'm very intrigued to see perform. We will have official action on this card, as we will for every single episode for this season. So there will be at least one target. If you guys watch the fights live with me, you join me in the fight companion, you guys will see that play out live. I'll let you guys know as that fight is on there. And what else, man? We're going to jump into the first fight. If you guys can, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, catch me on all my social media, and I'll just let you know we are powered by BETUS. Sign up through the link in the description of this video. Get a 125% match on your first 3 deposits. No other sportsbooks are giving you those type of deposit matches. All right, guys? And if you do that, let me know so I can send you over an additional gift. All right? Won't hold you up anymore. Let's jump into the first fight.
The teller, the teller, the teller, the teller.
So once again on this show, the UFC kicks the episode off with one of the more high-paced or high-energy type of matchups here in the flyweight division. Jack Duffy taking on Nick Piccininni. This fight is possibly my favorite matchup on this episode. I really like this matchup here. 2 undefeated prospects. Both fighters have high-level grappling behind them. Now, Jack Duffy is more of a jiu-jitsu-based fighter. He's a high-level Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt. So, you know, he could really give you problems down on the mat. But what's interesting here is the opponent that he has, and Nick Piccininni, is an extremely high-level wrestler, in my opinion. And, you know, an Oklahoma State wrestler, a dude that's battled dudes like Thomas Gilman. If you guys are familiar with Thomas Gilman, in fact, Nick Piccininni and Thomas Gilman had a little beef back in the day. You could pull it up on YouTube. This was something that always intrigued me. I was kind of a Thomas Gilman fan. I like the energy that he brought to his wrestling matches. But I mean, you know, a big rivalry there, and Nick Piccininni brings that wrestling base with him into the MMA cage. He's a fighter that trained over at AKA for some time, but now has made the move over to Fortis MMA. And the reason why he made the move is because of this fighter right here. This is Kyle Crutchmer, fights over in Bellator. I believe he has a fight coming up on the horizon, but Nick Piccininni has stated that Kyle Crutchmer is essentially a role model to him, or a mentor to him. Kind of looks up to him, you know, a little bit. It's not really on a level playing field there. Like, they're like sidekicks working together. He even kind of self-admitted that he's following the lead of Kyle Crutchmer. So Crutchmer had to move over to Texas because he has a daughter there or whatnot, and Nick Piccininni makes the move with him. So I like the loyalty there, not so much more to the gym, but to his boy, someone that he's started wrestling with from a very young age. And how do I see this fight playing out? Both these fighters still relatively young. As far as their pro experience goes, you know, they don't have an extreme amount of professional experience. But of course, we understand when you have fighters like this that have the decorated grappling experience. I mean, they have their experience in combat in their own way. Nick Piccininni is not just a 6-0 fighter. I mean, this is a dude that's competed many of times. And when it comes to wrestling, they compete more than almost any other martial art, really. I mean, I could imagine the amount of matches Nick Piccininni has had since he was a kid. And I know a wrestling match is not the same as a fight, but still, he's going to be a game fighter. And Jack Duffy, what's interesting about Jack Duffy is that he's 7-0, almost has the same amount of fights as Nick Piccininni, just one more fight. But the difference is Jack Duffy has been in the mixed martial arts world for a much longer time, making his professional debut back in 2012 compared to Piccininni, which I believe Piccininni made his pro debut in like 2021. He's only been a pro for a couple of years. So usually I tend to feel that the fighter that's been pro for a longer time has an advantage there, because that he's been, even if he hasn't had as many fights, he's been active in the MMA world, in the gyms, right? I mean, when you already made your pro debut back in 2012, Jack Duffy obviously is a fighter that's been involved in the gym and has been getting in work and has been refining his craft for many years. And he's just 28 years old. It's not like, he's an old fart that's past his prime or anything. So I expect we definitely see the best version of Jack Duffy in this fight. I'll cut to the chase here. I think this fight's definitely going to go down to the mat. I really do. With Nick pushing the pace with the wrestling, I think he's going to look to close the distance and use his wrestling abilities to have success in this fight. And I'm really curious to see how Jack can counter that with his jiu-jitsu. And, is he going to be on his back just getting ground and pounded and smothered? Does Nick potentially set up a sub on him? We've seen Nick use his wrestling to pull off subs down in the mat as well. A lot of power type chokes, arm triangle chokes and whatnot. I think that Jack Duffy is too high level for that. I'd be kind of surprised if he gets caught in like an arm triangle choke. I mean, I'm not saying it's out of the realm, but I'm definitely leaning more towards this fight going to a decision. But I think that it's Nick Piccininni that's going to be pushing the pace with his wrestling and just kind of dominating the scrambles and the positions where he's winning rounds. Now, I would be very intrigued to see how this fight plays out on the feet and who would get the better of the striking. I haven't seen a lot from them as far as their striking goes, and I really couldn't give you a solid answer who would get the better of the striking there. Maybe Piccininni has a little bit more power in his hands, but Jack Duffy maybe a little bit more fluid and a little more athletic. I don't know. I mean, I'd be very interested to see how that would play out, but I don't think we're going to be able to see that for an extended period of time. I think these guys are going to be clinched up and they're going to be in scrambles down on the mat. And I think that is Piccininni that will get the better. That wrestling background that he has is going to pay dividends. And, he's a pretty decorated wrestler as well. I know he's won some awards there on the wrestling scene. He's not just a pedestrian wrestler, and obviously even just being a wrestler from Oklahoma State shows you the pedigree that he has. And you take a look at the betting line. He's a minus 300 favorite. Okay, so people are high on him. This is a fighter that people really have high expectations for. I like him. I like him to win this fight. I just don't know, man, if that line is worth it, in my opinion, because Jack Duffy, also, let me just mention Jack Duffy training with Team Alpha Male. I know he's put in some work with Team Alpha Male, and he surrounds himself with some high-level fighters, and he has a potentially high ceiling as well. All right, the jiu-jitsu is high caliber, and sometimes these wrestlers, they get taught a lesson throughout their career, early on in their career, right? They're shooting these takedowns, they're pushing with the wrestling. Sometimes they tire themselves a little bit and they put themselves in vulnerable situations where they get caught in a sub. Maybe they get their back taken. Maybe they get caught in even more of an elementary sub, like a guillotine or something like that. And when you have a high-level jiu-jitsu player like Jack Duffy, who has 4 subs out of his 7 fights, but again, a striped black belt, I just wouldn't be shocked if Duffy can work some magic down in the mat. And then there was that X factor of the striking too. So I'm not a big fan of the minus 300 line, guys. I'm not. And I would say there's more value on a plus 200 line on Jack Duffy, but most likely we're going to see Nick Piccininni go in there, use that wrestling pedigree to grind out a decision. And it'll be interesting to see, does he get a contract if it's not the most exciting type of fight? If you're Nick Piccininni and you're getting those takedowns, I would really like to see him open up with some ground and pound and just have a high pace to the fight with his ground and pound and just keep us entertained while they're down there. Let's see some blood, try to open Jack up with some elbows or something like that and get a contract. I would love to see one of these fighters get a contract. I think both these fighters have legitimate potential to make noise down the line and in the division. We bump up one division from the flyweight division up to the bantamweight division. This fight should really have a high pace to it as well. This should be a fun one. We have Malcolm Wellmaker taking on Adam Bramhald. What's similar about this fight compared to the last fight we just talked about is both fighters have the same stylistic strength, right? In the last fight, both fighters were grappling-based fighters. In this matchup here, both fighters favor their striking, to say the least. Adam Bramhald has a very technical Muay Thai type of style. I would say from the tape that I pulled up on him, I don't think that he has necessarily the best power. I think he's a little bit more of a volume striker. He's a technical striker. He's tricky, and he can put the work on you on the feet. But I think that if he has an advantage as far as the striking goes, it may be a little bit in regards to his volume. He also has some really nice inside trips, kind of like that classic Muay Thai type of style with the takedowns. You know, a lot of inside trips if they clinch up. Wouldn't be shocked if he's able to pull a little bit of that off in the cage. On the other hand, Malcolm is a fighter that I've been pretty pleased with breaking down tape on him, and I think this fighter has some serious potential. Interestingly enough, here he's fighting out of the orthodox stance. Some of the tape that you pull up on him, he'll fight out of the southpaw stance as well. He has power in his hands. Not the biggest combination type of fighter. Doesn't put a lot of big combinations together, but there's serious power there. And he lands the mark when he's looking to land his shots. He does land the mark, and he puts dudes out. All right, you pull up his fights on YouTube, and the vast majority of those fights you're going to pull up, you're going to see the opposition falling down, collapsing to their back. All right, so this is a knockout artist. Now, if you look at his pro resume, and I know you'll just see 3 knockouts there, which is still a decent ratio compared to him only having 7 pro fights. But you have to note that he has a lengthy amateur resume. I think he had almost like 10 amateur fights where a good amount of those victories for him were by knockout as well. At least over half. I think half or more were by knockouts, okay? So the knockout power is what really stands out to me. I think a potential X factor that Malcolm has in this matchup as well could be his grappling. I think if one fighter does have a grappling edge, I wouldn't be surprised if it's Malcolm that could potentially do some damage down there. He's had a couple submission victories as well. Not an overwhelming amount, but he's working on that aspect of his game. Those submissions are against low-level fighters. That has to stand out to you there. Maybe Adam is a step above that, but Adam, to me, really seems to want to keep fights on the feet and use that Muay Thai, that volume Muay Thai. And I think that if we see any fighter, throwing out an X factor type of attack, I think that it would be coming from Malcolm. Malcolm may be the more well-rounded fighter, but even standing, I do favor him to get the better of Adam. One thing that also stood out to me is even though I'm not down on the striking abilities of Adam, but if you watch his tape on YouTube, even in some of the fights that he's won and some of the fights he's looked good in, he has these hiccups in the cage where he gets tagged. I've seen him get tagged with some big shots in his fights. And again, even in fights that he came back and won, but still, I don't like the fact that he's eating shots. Some of those shots that he's took, I feel that a fighter like Malcolm could drop him or knock him out with those shots. So this is a good fight. But I am a little bit higher on the ceiling of Malcolm Wellmaker. Also, I mean, I don't know how much stock you want to put into this, but Adam does have 2 losses as a pro. They came very early on in his pro career. He was subbed once and knocked out once. I think both those losses came back to back as well. It was early on in his career, but he has been knocked out. And you take a look at the level of competition. Low level competition was back in 2016 and 17, but we haven't really seen any of those type of issues with Malcolm thus far. I mean, this kid really might be the truth. And I say kid, he is 30 years old. Both these fighters are actually 30 years old. So getting a little bit of a later start to their potential UFC careers if they do get signed. I think the winner of this fight very well can get signed no matter who it is, but I'm leaning it being Malcolm Wellmaker. And I'm going to say, even if he doesn't get that knockout, he will hurt Adam and he will drop him in the fight. Maybe Adam can survive that onslaught there. And try to put his own damage on as well and make this an exciting fight. But at the end of the day, I think it's the more damaging and impactful shots that will be coming from Malcolm Wellmaker. That's what makes me side with him here. And he's a -160. That line's not completely out of reach. We have no movement on it as of yet on BetUS. Monitor that line and see where it goes. But, I mean, that's not too steep of a line. If you like Malcolm there, I think that he's the fighter, like I said, with the higher ceiling. I think he gets the job done. In the middleweight division, we have Marco Tulio Silva taking on Matthieu Letho. Marco Tulio Silva fought on this past season of Dana White's Contender Series. He did not get the contract, but he did indeed have a victory in that fight over a fighter that's actually fighting on next week's episode. And Yusri Belgari, who is a huge fighter. He's a fighter that came into MMA with that kickboxing experience. He's been in there with a lot of big names. If you guys remember, there was a lot of buzz about him in that fight. We'll be talking a lot more about him in the near future. But, a kickboxer that's been in there with high-level fighters like Donovan Wise and Alex Pereira, of course. That was one that really stood out to us there. And even had a victory over Alex Pereira. Okay, so just to kind of understand, and even was in there with Israel Adesanya. Let me also mention that. Had 2 losses to Israel Adesanya. But was a decently high-level kickboxer, man, that really brings in some intangibles to the cage, training over at now Team Killcliff FC. And I think that Yusri has some real potential. And Marco Tulio Silva got the better of that fight. Now, he didn't really go out there and shine. I mean, obviously, he didn't get the contract, but he went out there and won that fight. He really was handling business. I mean, he did, like I said, he went out there, got the job done. And I think that Marco Tulio Silva is going to fight a different type of fight here. I really do. Even after that victory, he went out to his next fight, got a knockout, and I have a gut feeling that he's going to come out and be a little bit more aggressive and really look to get a finish in this fight here. That could be a problem, in my opinion, because the fighter that he's facing off with, the Frenchman, although I'm not very high on him, one thing that I'll say that he does pretty decent when I break down tape on him is his striking, and it's specifically the knockout threat that he has with his striking. He throws some pretty nice kicks out there, and he kind of looks for those one big shot knockouts, right? Doesn't put a lot of stringy combinations together, but he does throw some dangerous attacks on the feet, some powerful attacks. And if Marco Tulio Silva makes one mistake, I could potentially see Letho getting a knockout here. Out of Leto's 6 victories, 5 of them have come by way of knockout, fighting very low level talent where he's been fighting. There's no question about that. Fighting over in Hexagon MMA for the most part. Did have a fight over in Bellator 280, but I mean, other than that, still. And even the fighter he fought there, I'm not familiar with him, Yusuf Obas. If you guys are an Obas fan, hit the comment section up below. But he lost that fight anyway. He was knocked out in that fight, was also submitted in his first pro fight. Both of his losses coming by way of finish. I still will say that he is potentially dangerous here if Marco is not on his P's and Q's. We've seen Marco knocked out before. His lone loss as a professional was a knockout loss that he had back in 2018 to Alexandre Silva. Got knocked out in the second round there. So if Marco Tulio Silva fights a safe fight here, I think that he will get the better of the striking exchanges, but I would actually expect him to change levels and mix things up, and I think that he could have a solid advantage down on the mat with his BJJ. I think that's an advantage here that may sneak out, and he just may show to be the more polished fighter. He's a Shuto Box product. Obviously, he surrounds himself with some high-level fighters like Charles Oliveira and whatnot. Definitely surrounds himself with high-level fighters. You guys know that's one of the most stacked gyms on planet Earth. And it's just, we'll see what kind of fight that he fights. And I think that I'm gonna pick Marco Tulio Silva to actually eventually get a submission in this fight. I'm gonna say he pulls off a sub. Matthieu Letho, not only has he not been in there with high-level fighters, from what I've been able to pull up and what I see from him, he's not really surrounding himself with a lot of high-level fighters, and we may just see these fighters just be on different levels, just as far as their overall abilities go. So I think that Marco Tulio Silva can find the sub here. He is a -400 on BetUS right now. I think he is the biggest favorite on the card. He's the biggest favorite on the card. And I'm going to say that he delivers. Let me also just note this season, the favorites have really been delivering. And I feel bad because I kind of warned you guys, you got to be careful targeting all the favorites because in the past seasons, we've seen a lot of underdogs rise to the occasion. But this season so far, I mean, well, we're only 2 weeks into it, so give us a break here. But the first 2 weeks, the first 10 fights, the favorites have really been delivering. Plenty of time for that trend to change. But I think this is probably going to be one of those fights where the favorite delivers. Give me Marco Tulio Silva to win this fight. The only way he loses is if the Frenchman cracks him with a flashy type of KO shot and shakes things up. But I think that Marco Tulio Silva gets a sub. Now, I did say that the first fight that we talked about was probably my favorite fight in this card. I think I spoke too soon because I'm really intrigued for a lot of these matchups. This is one that really stands out to me in the featherweight division. Michael Aswell taking on Bogdan Grad. Bogdan Grad, of course, a Dana White's Contender Series alumni. He came up short, to say the least, in his last opportunity. He was knocked out by Tom Nolan very early on in that fight, was knocked out within a minute and 23 seconds. That was a really fun fight, if you guys remember. Just leading up to it, there was a lot of energy behind that fight at the weigh-ins, the stare downs, and then even the stare downs as they were entering the cage. I mean, it was a very high energy type of affair, and Tom Nolan cracked him, and that's what Tom Nolan could do to you. There's no question about that. Tom Nolan has a lot of early KOs. We've also seen him knocked out early, but he ran into a shot. But you got to like the way that he bounced back after that loss. 2 victories in a row, a knockout and a submission. Dude is like a pit bull. I really hope that he ends up putting it together, because I think that he's kind of a funny character. And he's a fun fighter to watch. He has a lot of flashy KOs. He'll throw some wild stuff at you, mixes the kicks in nice, flying knees, spinning attacks, a lot of spinning attacks. And I'm not saying he's a high-level grappler. I'm not saying that. But actually, I think that he shows a little bit more grappling on tape than his opponent here in Aswell. Aswell, to me, is more of a boxing type of fighter. He's training out of Houston, Texas. I think he trains with, a fighter that we're very familiar with. And, excuse me here, name slip in my mind. We interviewed him here on the show. Adrian Yanez kind of has the fluid type of boxing style like Yanez. Haven't seen too much from his overall game as far as an MMA fighter. I mean, I haven't seen him showing too much. I mean, he doesn't have a sub to his name as a pro. And on the other hand, Bogdan Grad, even though he's fighting some lower level fighters, at times you see him working in some grappling, and he's working some things down there. And I think that he's evolving, and he's a little bit more of a mature fighter right now. He's 28 years old. He's more physically mature. He has 15 pro fights compared to the 10 of Michael Aswell. I think that Bogdan Grad has some things going for him here. Also, like we mentioned earlier, a fighter that has already fought on the show. He's going to be extremely hungry, but he knows the experience already, right? He's going to be a little bit more prepared this time when he steps in there. He knows the whole process before he goes into the cage. And remember, when he lost that fight to Tom Nolan, we didn't get to see that fight play out. And one thing that Bogdan Grad has going for him is, as the fight progresses, man, he continues to deliver. He has good cardio, and when he's willing to get involved in a war. He thrives in those types of situations. He's constantly looking to do damage. And I think you guys know where I'm going with this. I like him to win this fight. Where he can run into trouble, though, is Michael Aswell will have a little bit of a boxing advantage. And if they're at range and they're exchanging, it could be Aswell that touches him up a little bit and lands some shots with his hands. Maybe he potentially drops Grad if Grad gets overzealous and over excited in there like he did in the last fight. Maybe he gets clipped and dropped with the shot. But I do feel that I have to settle in with the Grad pick here. And I was a little bit back and forth with this, but the more I dove into this fight, I felt pretty confident that that's the way I had to go. I'm not saying I'm very confident he's going to win the fight, but I settled in on that pick. I was like, that's the way I got to go. I was doing, checking off the boxes, and I really hope that Grad can get it done. So just has to avoid getting clipped with an early shot here. Let this fight play out for some time. And I think he can show us some things in there. And I will take Bogdan Grad to get the job done. I'm going to say he is live to get a knockout, man. He throws some dangerous things out there, but we haven't seen Aswell finish thus far. Seems to be pretty tough. He's a young fighter, but Grad has the ability to get a knockout. Trust me when I tell you that. He'll throw some dangerous attacks there, but I'll say he doesn't get that knockout. I'm going to say maybe he hurts Aswell a little bit here and there, but pushes the pace and lands the damaging shots, and most likely he's going to win a decision here. It's hard for me to fade Aswell to be finished. He's looked pretty durable in there. I like Bogdan Grad to get the job done. He's currently a minus 135 on BetUS, so he's a slight favorite. And we'll see how that fight plays out. That should be a fun one.
Michael Vick here at BetUS.com. Get it all. Huge bonuses, great odds, a race book, live in-game betting, and a casino. BetUS, my online sports book and casino.
Then we get to the main event, and I seen people hating on this matchup here. Some people saying, is this the best the UFC could put together for a main event on this show? These dudes don't even show to have that much promise. Maybe I'm just being optimistic, but I have a completely different outlook on this fight. I'm very excited for it, especially the more I dove into it, listening to interviews from Leon Anderson. I'm very intrigued to see what he brings to the cage. I think he's a tough dude that has potential. I don't think that the 6-2 record that he has is indicative of who he is as a fighter, to say the least. I really think that he has a lot more potential than that 6-2 record. On the other hand, Andrey Pulyaev, who's 8-2, he's also a danger striker. I really like who he surrounds himself with. and training with Alexander Shlemenko and Andrey Koreshkov. Now, Shlemenko, if you guys aren't familiar with Shlemenko, which I'm sure a lot of you guys are, but Shlemenko was such a warrior in Bellator back in the day. I mean, this dude had so many professional fights. He was always fun to watch. More of a striking-based fighter, but he was well-rounded, but he was looking to land damaging shots, and you spinning back fists, all knees, all that stuff. He had so many crazy knockouts. And as he got older, he had all these young lions that he was grooming, specifically Andrey Koreshkov and Alexander Sarnovsky. If you remember him, when they were both young in the Bellator cage, they were two of the biggest prospects working their way through the Bellator promotion, and they were going out there knocking dudes out left and right. And it was Shlemenko that taught them that ability. And Koreshkov, I'll just throw this out there real quick. If you guys haven't heard this story, man, I met Andrey Koreshkov over in Boca Raton. He was down for some type of MMA thing. And it was funny, man. I was in a Nordstrom rack shopping for some clothes for the weekend or whatnot. I look over, I see Koreshkov right to my side, which if you guys have been following me for some time, you know Koreshkov was one of my favorite Bellator fighters of all time. I was a legitimate fan. It wasn't like I'm just bumping into a fighter. And I do have a picture with him. I posted it somewhere on my IG. But, the point that I'm getting at is I like who Andrey is surrounding himself with, and Andrey Pulyaev. You surround yourself with a coach like Shlemenko, you're going to be fine-tuned, you're going to be dangerous, and you're not going to be really cutting that many corners. So I think that he will be prepared in that sense, and that's going to be crucial because when you're taking out a fighter like Liam Anderson, who has that wrestling pedigree, this is a fighter that even though Liam Anderson comes off a big-time, flashy head kick KO, if you haven't seen that, go pull that fight up because that was a real nasty head kick KO. He's a fighter that has the wrestling background first and foremost. He's been wrestling since his middle school days. I found it interesting though, in some of the interviews I was listening to from him, he was saying that he was never really a wrestling fan. He actually only got into wrestling and stuck with wrestling because he knew that he needed those skills eventually if he was going to be a successful mixed martial artist. And that's what he wanted to do from a very young age. And that's some of the stuff that has intrigued me from him. I love to hear those stories from these young fighters that I could relate to, in a lot of ways. And he was talking about how when he was like in ninth grade or something, someone in his high school was saying, "Hey, did you see the fights this weekend?" And the fights that happened to be taking place that weekend, I think it was the Lyoto Machida versus Rashad Evans fight. I know exactly where I was for that fight. I was at a Hooters in Tallahassee, jumping up, flipping the table around. You know what I mean? I was going crazy when Machida had that knockout. So it's funny hearing his story. He was obviously a younger kid. I was in college. He was in high school, but that's what gravitated him towards the sport. He started breaking down tape, pulling up fights on Chuck Liddell and whatnot. And he fell in love with the sport, and he knew he wanted to fight in the UFC or be a professional fighter since he was in high school. I love those kind of stories. So he stuck with wrestling, and I think that he has potential to be a good fighter. Like I said, he's only 6-2 as a pro, but I don't think that's who he is as a fighter. I was really hoping that Liam Anderson was going to be the underdog here as I was looking at this fight, and before some of the certain books open up their lines. And Liam Anderson, as we're going to see right now, he opened up as a favorite on BetUS at -160. I was hoping people were going to kind of be on the potentially more dangerous striker, if you will. But I don't even know if that's the case. We saw what Liam Anderson just did in his last fight. He's a scrappy dude. But yeah, Pulyaev is dangerous in his own right. He loves to spam the kicks, the body kicks. He works his kicking game in there very well. So he's dangerous there as well. I'm interested to see how the striking plays out, but I like the wrestling X factor that Liam Anderson has. I think he could potentially drag Andrey into the deep waters as the fight goes on, and maybe he gets the better of him there. All in all, I got to side with Liam Anderson. Not only am I rooting for him because I want to see him have success, I want to see him get a contract. I like the way he talks in the mic in his interviews, and as I start to do my fighter interviews moving forward, as I promised you guys I am, as I'm working on some things, this is a fighter that I could send an invitation out and want to chop it up with, and I hope that he works his way into the UFC and has success. So go check him out. Go check some of the interviews he's had. He's a cool dude, and I think this is a good test for him. I think this fight delivers. I think we see a knockout in this fight. I'm going to say Liam Anderson gets a finish, maybe a ground and pound finish. Maybe he lands another big head kick. I think this fight's going to be a scrap, and somebody's going to get clipped. I'm looking at more unders in this fight. I'm looking at a knockout in this fight. And both men have been knocked out already in the limited amount of fights they've had. Both them in their losses, and half of their losses, both men lost twice. They've been knocked out before. So they're willing to go in there and exchange. And we can very well see knockout in this fight, and I'm hoping that it's the American getting the job done there. So I like his story, and I like what he's about. So he's a -160 favorite. Is there any value on that? Hey, it's another line that's not that steep, especially for the lines we see on this show. So I like the tools that he checks off, has that wrestling background. I don't think that line's out of reach at all. And I like Liam Anderson. I think he's actually the more proven fighter. All right, guys, that's going to wrap up this episode. Like I said, man, tune in to the show with me. I'll be live on YouTube. Hope to see you guys all there. And I will have some action locked in for this card. So if you're interested in that, reach out to me. I'll give you some further information there. Please like this video. Please subscribe, guys. It means so much to me. We're creeping up on that 10,000 subscriber mark. When we hit that 10,000 subscriber mark, I'm going to give something out very special here on the show, on the podcast, or at the YouTube channel, whatever we're calling it these days. So please help me get to that 10K mark and go follow me on all my social media. It really helps me. I'm almost at 10K on IG as well. And I've been working, been grinding to get there. But big things coming, guys. All right. Hope you guys all have a great week. No UFC action, no official UFC cards taking place this upcoming weekend. But I will have content coming to you guys all throughout the week. All right, guys. Signing out. Teller.
The teller. The teller. The teller. The teller.